Today we have an exceptional guest joining Dan. Welcome, Sylvie, to the Cinchy Learning Series. Let me tell you a little bit about Sylvie. Sylvie has delivered data-driven solutions to help guide some of the biggest names in tech through periods of extreme growth. She's worked with Apple, Franklin Templeton Investments, Salesforce, Mozilla, and is the first CIO at Dropbox, pivoting change through enterprise technology transformation, organizational design, talent strategy, and operating models. Sylvie is also a member of the board of directors for Cinchy. Please ask questions as we go along. I will monitor the chat box for your questions. Because we have such great content and we want to make sure that we move this forward as quick as possible, we will be saving all verbal questions to the end of this session, but I will monitor the chat box and interrupt Dan and Sylvie if there's something that we feel needs to be answered right in that moment. So at this point, I will actually hand it over to you, Sylvie, for you to proceed.
Thank you, Joanne. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dan and Joanne, for having me today and being part of the Cinchy kickoff, the Cinchy TV kickoff for 2021. As Joanne mentioned, I'm the CIO at Dropbox. I've been there for about 4 years now. And I've had the great opportunity to work with so many storied companies like Apple and Mozilla and Salesforce. And I've learned so much in financial services at my time at Franklin Templeton. My journey as a CIO has been through taking on a lot of new risks and challenges. And one of the things that I realized is that I really pushed the limits on a lot of things on the technology and brought in new ways of thinking, bridging the old way of thinking to a new way of thinking. And early in my career, I was very involved in data and data architecture and data infrastructure. It was really a passion of mine. And I truly believe that because data was so central of how I looked at the world of IT, it was a catalyst in my career. Now, let's talk a little bit about how I went through my journey and how I discovered the capabilities of Cinchy Data Fabric. It really wasn't something I had and learned in one sitting. It was truly a process. And it was a process to understand the value of data centricity. It reminded me a little bit of the nested dolls. And as you open one up, it unlocked another level. And at times, I had to restack the dolls and went through the journey again. And every time I was unlocking something more in my understanding of the power of Cinchy. It was truly a fascinating time. And I really enjoyed stacking and unstacking the dolls and learning so much more. And it was a moment for me as well as I was discovering the power of the Cinchy platform 5 or 6 years ago, or in that time frame. I had a vision for a way for people to own and control their data and control their data as part of an ecosystem, right? That could create some experiences for you. And of course, at the time, I was thinking of, data privacy, user privacy, and the world of IoT, where there was nothing to manage all of this. And as I unlocked the power of Cinchy and understanding data centricity through this, unnested dolls, I realized that vision had just materialized itself through the power of Cinchy. It was just fantastic.
Thanks, Sylvie, and really excited to have you join us today. So what I'll do for those who are joining us who may be new to data centricity is just give a quick recap on what it is at a very high level. Really, we've been operating with a macro architecture of app centricity for now many decades. And in this model, there's definitely been technology innovation over the past 40 plus years, but it's still along the lines of this pattern of there's an app for everything and a database for every app. And that's the fundamental flaw in this approach. So in a world where if your organization has or needs 500 different applications, each of which delivers unique capabilities, well, that's 500 silos. And that's a heck of a lot of integration to achieve total connectivity of all of that information. So the result of that is you don't have that connectivity. You have silos, you have fragmentation, and in spite of that, the efforts to pull that connectivity together can consume half of the IT budget of most companies on the planet. I know I saw that in my experience in working at some big banks. And it doesn't matter if it's APIs or ETLs, microservices, it's still fundamentally the concept of integration, where every time a system needs to interact with data from another system, you're going to do that integration, and that's expensive, it's complex, it duplicates the data and has all these other consequences. So the shift really is around changing the paradigm and almost flipping it on its head, where data becomes truly central, not to an application, but central to an organization. And that's a very different way of thinking about it. So imagine the apps of the future being ones that, while they may provide interaction to data, they don't own the data, they don't store the data, they are simply providing an experience into the data, where in this model, 500 apps equals 0 silos and requires 0 integration. Now, these are two polar extremes, the left versus the right. No organization it's not possible, sadly, to click the go button and suddenly you're on the right. That is very similar, Sylvie, to your experience as a journey of discovery, but then there's the journey of the transformation. Hey, there's still mainframes kicking today, 40 plus years after Oracle introduced the first relational database. So it's going to be a little while before the world converges on nothing but data centricity, but the journey is already starting for many.
Awesome. You know, if I take this next slide from Dan, is this journey I went through, and you know, there's so many 7-step methodologies, and I really laughed at myself when I realized that my nested doll example, I had like these 7 nested dolls, and this is how I went through it. Doesn't mean everybody will use those exact same steps to understand it, but I thought like laying them out this way will help create that journey and that transformation in stages that are consumable or digestible. And I guess 7 is a magic number. But as I mentioned earlier, I went back into on the prior stages of steps 1 through 7 and back in and back up. And every time I was unlocking something unique for myself. And it gave me so much more to understand the platform power, especially as it gives it to the IT organizations. It just blew my mind away. Now, there's a lot of words here. We're not expecting you to read them right now. We're going to take the next few slides to go through the journey and walk through these 7 steps. So Dan and I will have a conversation around each of them.
Great. So the first step, and again, these are the steps that Sylvie went through in her process. Different folks may have different journeys, but it's the same more or less macro topics. That's my experience, and that was my own experience personally as well. So the first one is the concept of data belonging in a network. So you'll hear terms like data fabric or data mesh or data network. In many ways, there may be slight nuances, but there's still macro alignment in terms of it's links, it's not copies. And this type of a model, it's eliminating the need to build and maintain point-to-point integration. So if you just think conceptually, if you get a new computer at home or in the office, you either plug one Ethernet cable or hook it up to one Wi-Fi. And with that one link, you're now connected to billions of other computers and the people at the other end of those computers. You would not run a billion Ethernet cables to your computer. In spite of that's how it has worked for data when data is not managed as a network. So that's a pretty big paradigm shift. But as you can imagine, that unlocks exponential simplification. So what you're seeing in the background there is an example of data as a network. So you're seeing the evolution of our own data fabric that we've used for our company, and organizations who really begin their data centricity journey will start with a similar beginning and sort of build that fabric over time. Where while you're seeing all the data and visualizing that and all the links and connectivity between that, those lines do not translate to $100,000 integrations. They're links. There's no copies, there's no duplications, there's no APIs, there's no ETLs. It's connected. And again, that's the journey. So Sylvie, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, this visualization, I don't know if you guys saw this. It's a visualization of all your data that's connected to the fabric and how it's all interconnected with each other. And if you saw at the bottom there, it's like a time machine. You can visualize the state of your data connectedness at any point in time. And I was blown away when I saw that. But it's really about no longer needing point-to-point data integrations. You really find your data versus building the pipes and creating those data flows between systems and all the work that entails. In my opinion, this has significantly changed how you think about development and increases developer productivity and velocity. And therefore, you're delivering much faster to your enterprise or to your business. This is just mind blowing. Data integration is actually going to become obsolete. That's my point of view.
And so I remember that visualization that I was showing earlier. We actually didn't have that in early versions of the platform. The visualization isn't the platform; it is a visualization of the platform. But I remember when we initially created the first MVP of that, it reminded me of back when I first experienced Google Maps. Prior to that, there was MapQuest, and prior to that, there was physical maps. But it was constrained. You could only have a limited fog of war, but Google Maps, you could scroll infinitely and get visibility of the entire planet. And that blew my mind, the fact that you could do that. I don't know if others had that same realization, but being able to see that Google Maps equivalent of all of my company's knowledge similarly blew my mind. And all it was just playing back what we already were doing, and that we already had a data fabric, and all the information was connected. So the visual is powerful. But it's the fact that it's actually the interconnected information behind that visual that is the transformation.
Totally agree.
So the next insight or core concept of data centricity is really building off of that network-based approach, which is the idea of zero copy integration. So today you have app integration, you have data integration, and you're doing that over dozens, hundreds, thousands of different technological approaches that have evolved over years and decades. But what they all have in common is they're sending a copy along the wire, whether it's a JSON result set over a REST or some other proprietary format over a proprietary protocol. It's more or less the same conceptual approach. So this is really the early beginnings of what's going to become a true standard, because this is the way that enables the control over data, this idea of zero copy integration. And the premise here is actually quite simple, which is your information sharing should be managed by providing access, not providing copies. So like our viewpoint on the future is, and this is a little bit away, but copying of data will be illegal in the same way that copying of money is illegal, it's counterfeit. And if you buy into the idea that data has value, you would ultimately likely draw that same conclusion if you kind of think it through. So again, the lines that you're seeing between the different subnets and the networks and the links between all of that, again, there's no copying, there's no integration, there's no duplication of data, there's no incremental IT effort, there's no 6-month project. That's the power of zero copy integration.
Yeah, this is, again, you'll hear my excitement about this as every step we went through, I kind of live it every day, thinking about this. But imagine a world where you don't need to manage a proliferation of spreadsheets, right? We all know what happens, like people download data and copy it and make a bunch of other spreadsheets, and they in themselves proliferate. And you don't need to manage data duplication and the challenges that surround data duplication, like data quality, data currency and freshness, privacy, security, and the list goes on. So this really significantly improves how you do your data governance and compliance, and it really simplifies it. It's doing this notoriously difficult work, so it just goes away, or significantly reduced in complexity. And in the end, you're really lowering your risk. You're increasing and improving the control of what I say, your data. So this is just another level of unlocking the power of Cinchy.
So number 3 is the concept of autonomous data. So we've heard of autonomous vehicles, which is really about enabling the software to take control of the vehicle in place of the human. Hopefully that never is fully taken away, but because it's kind of fun to drive. But autonomous data is actually a little bit of the reverse of that, which is taking control away from the software and handing it back to the human, the owners of that data. But the premise here is that data should be separated from the application. So today, data is the servant to the application, but it in fact is the core asset. It is the crown jewel. It is what actually matters at the end of the day. It has the stickiness. Apps come and go, but your data lives and evolves beyond that. They're transient, data is perpetual. And autonomous data is really the idea that data should exist outside of any individual application. It's its own separate thing. It's free of the app. It's has self-describing, it's self-governing, it's self-controlling, and it's the enablement of managing data in a central manner. While the physical infrastructure may be distributed, there's the logical consolidation of how one manages data across an organization. And again, the apps then are interacting with that, but the data is free. It's decoupled from those individual applications. So the information that you're seeing on a fabric, if you're in that eventual end state of full data centricity, then all of your data is autonomous. But in reality, that's not going to happen for organizations that start the journey. They're going to start to introduce autonomous data to capture their new attributes, their new entities. But at the same time, you have all of your existing data assets that are in your existing on-prem and SaaS applications, and you're going to want to connect that into the fabric. So while that data itself is not autonomous, you're benefiting from the zero copy integration. You're benefiting from the network-based architecture to eliminate point-to-point integration. But the key with autonomous data is that new information is born on the fabric, and that new information is not owned by any individual application.
Yeah, freeing your data from your apps and the rigid data structures is just so powerful. And I really believe that the data is now working for you and you're not working on your data. Your data is already protected at the data level with the controls and the power of the fabric. But in the context of how this can be extremely useful is the ability to give people instant and self-service access to data from all your apps connected to the fabric without the need of building complex data marts or similar structures. Another example where I find this very, very useful is an example of an M&A context where two companies have different CRMs. You connect the CRMs to your fabric, and all of a sudden you have an automated customer 360 available at your fingertips and just using simple SQL skills. You don't have to do this complex merging of applications to be able to have that 360. So this is just a couple examples of what you can do with this. And I'm sure each of you are thinking on this call, like whatever you can do with this, but data autonomy is huge. And it's like, if you think about the 7 stages, this one like starts to make the next steps like, further mind-blowing.
So number 4 is the concept of collaborative intelligence. For those who have joined past sessions, will understand our viewpoint that you don't want to be data-driven, you want to be intelligence-driven. Data-driven is the opposite of what you want to be, and that's not how it works in nature. So in nature, it doesn't work through what's called a collective intelligence, where there's one brain and everything is data-driven. It's collaborative, where there's a good reason why all of us who are on this call, all of you, have separate brains. You have autonomy, you make your own decisions, but we can use a collaboration platform. Like right now, we're using the English language, we're using Zoom, we're using all these different collaboration platforms, but I'm not releasing my own autonomy of my information. I'm choosing what to share, what to collaborate on. So that's how it works in nature. That's what enables evolution. Without that, we wouldn't be having this conversation, to say the least. So the enablement of this is really making it so that individual systems, individual people, and even companies can collaborate as an alternative to the sharing and contribute intelligence and benefit from intelligence, but at the same time, they're intelligence driven, they're not data driven. So they retain that autonomy, that independence of thought. And that's both true for software, and it's also true for people. And that's what we see as really tapping into the innovation that has existed in nature and bringing that into the world of technology and software. So what you're seeing in the animation here is just an example of collaboration on an individual data set. And if you've seen any of the past episodes, specifically the one that went deep into collaborative intelligence, you'll remember the idea that people and systems working together to collaborate on a single record. And there was one example where you could take the email address of an individual person, use one service to turn that into a LinkedIn profile, then use another service to do personality profiling based on your LinkedIn data, and then use another service to then use the personality profile against your historical data to predict the probability that your leads are going to convert, so that you can concentrate on the leads that have the highest propensity to become customers. And being able to just orchestrate that, that's different systems, that's different people collaborating on data, and that is real intelligence.
Yeah, I mean, in addition to data quality, you're limiting your data, data fragmentation. And just to give examples, like if you didn't really catch this, I think this is a space where you try and learn and try and learn, but the collaborative intelligence is interweaving a lot of data from different spaces, and they're immediately enriching each other and making the fabric more intelligent. And you can imagine how robust this could be, where time-sensitive events and triggers, like in a banking world, are really critical, or immediately having access to product development, experiments, and A/B user testing. That is something you have immediately at your fingertips. Again, data silos and fragmentation are disappearing as you start to evolve at this level of the Cinchy platform.
So number 5 is the concept of schema plasticity, where, and I felt the pain of this personally when I was developing the traditional app-centric approach, where you build an app, that app has a model. It doesn't matter if it's relational, non-relational, it has, your code basically has a dependence on that model at one level or another. Even if you abstract it away, you change the model, it breaks your code. And that's actually the root of data silos, is because the inability to share a data platform because of this phenomenon. So plasticity is the capability to have the schema change without breaking the code at all. And it's really inspired as a concept off of how the human brain works, because you have neuroplasticity, which includes structural plasticity, which is your brain physically reorganizes itself as you learn. So a child who touches a stove and gets burned immediately is able to operationalize the intelligence that I'm not going to touch that stove again because it's going to hurt. And that's a brilliant design. And that's where the neural pathways are reorganizing themselves such that the fewer connections, the higher the intelligence, which is, I remember when I first learned that, it kind of blew my mind. Maybe there was some rewiring of my pathways there. But that is huge in terms of simplifying the development process. And actually what makes it now possible to have a shared platform and separate data from applications. Because even a child would intuitively know that why would you ever want to fragment your data? No one's chosen to say, let's fragment and silo our data. It's just a byproduct.
Yeah, this is really interesting. It's the ability to have the platform itself take care of your whole data journey and transformation. You don't have to manage the changes of that and all your applications, the regression testing, the QA you have to go through. And it's also your time machine, right? You can have applications based on different points in time of your data, and it's all done through this plasticity. And what it comes down to, if you step back and look at your teams and what they're doing and they're developing, they're really focused on creating business value add. They're not taking care of the housekeeping on the back end. So I think this is a huge change of how we're thinking about development going forward.
So hey, Dan, just doing a time check here. We've got a lot of great questions in the chat. So okay, I just want to make sure that we save time today to make sure that we answer those.
Will do, yeah. And one thing, I forget if we mentioned this up front, but we are, as we typically do, happy to stay on post the end of the 30 minutes. So we'll do as much as we can to make sure that all questions get answered. So if anyone has a question, if you're able to stay on after, we welcome you to do that. But thank you for that. So number 6 is the introduction of really experiences, what we think of today really as applications, but they're now reframed as experiences that are driven not just by data, but by metadata. It's that metadatification of code phenomena where the websites, the mobile apps that you think of today, imagine those are simply skins that are providing interaction simplification to the data that it is already separately available through a direct dynamic experience. So it's really that separation of skins and experiences from the information itself, whereas in an app-centric architecture, these are very much intertwined. So what you're seeing is an animation of a mortgage application and kind of digital process. But again, this is just a skin sitting atop data fabric. The data is separate from the applications.
Yeah, without spending too much time on this one, I mean, Cinchy TV is also a data experience that you're living on the data fabric. So, this is just mind blowing as well. And it accelerates definitely your time to market. It's a fraction of time.
And the last, which I think is one of the most interesting concepts, is the idea that data is the application. So this is kind of that macro concept where by separating the data from your applications, it actually eliminates a huge barrier. Like the purpose of applications, why do we even create them? It's to enable and enrich our information and enable the digitization of our what otherwise would be manual business processes. But in fact, they actually limit and they constrain. You want new capability, you have to change code. You can't just do that self-service. So data-centric really corrects the model. And it flips that such that data doesn't serve the app, it's the apps that serve the data. Data is the new boss. That's the summary of what we mean when we say data is the application.
And data is actually the new product, right? Thinking about my vision of 5 or 6 or 7 years ago, this is materializing. Again, it's a journey. It won't happen overnight. But just imagine the millions of dollars an IT organization can save by not having to buy all these SaaS solutions or this data, these applications, because it's all there within the fabric. Your data is your product.
So Sylvie, what if you were to summarize this from a CIO's perspective? What are the key takeaways and considerations there?
Yeah, I mean, in the end, this is a disruption, right? From shifting from applications to data centricity. And as we've seen in the past through, the bringing of like infrastructure as a service or software as a service, and even how the world of IT and the leaders of IT have changed over time from CIO to CDO to Chief Digital Transformation Officer. If you as a CIO or a senior IT leader don't take charge and lead this disruption, somebody else will lead it for you. And it's one of those moments where you really need to dig in and understand the power of this platform and get on board sooner than others.
All right. So thank you. So we'll open up for questions in a second, but Joanne, back to you.
Thanks, Dan. I have put in the chat that if people would like to join us next week, Dan's going to actually spend some time to go over data fabric fundamentals. We realize there's a lot of new people that are in the room this week. So we thought it would be a great opportunity to sort of level set and take you sort of back to the basics again. So we'd love to have you join us. And then finally, if you would love to have a deeper dive with us, I've also put the link there. You can just go to cinchy.com/dive deeper, and we'd be happy to spend more time with you and take you through any of these concepts and how it specifically applies to your business or any specific questions that you don't feel comfortable asking in the session today. Now, there are a ton of questions here in the chat box. Thank you so much for all of your questions. I will try to take them through. And we'll also, if you have a question specifically that you would like to ask directly, you can also unmute your mic and you'll be able to ask directly to Dan and Sylvie. So I'll just start with the very first question. If this is not via APIs or database to database, then how are you ingesting and interconnecting the data?
Yeah, so great question. So the reality is your data today lives inside of applications. So in the same way that prior to the World Wide Web coming into existence, where you have HTML and this powerful concept of a hyperlink, you had content, you had documents, and that content needed to be converted into HTML, and that new content could be born as HTML. Same idea here. So the reality is any data fabric technology is going to come pre-equipped with a connector architecture that in turn will use APIs. It will do ETLs. It will do data synchronization. But that's really to unlock the data and make it available on the fabric, whether it's a one-time convert or a continuous synchronization. because you'd be foolish to think that a data fabric is going to come in and replace everything that you spent a whole lot of time and money on. It's going to augment and extend and connect it. So think of the APIs as kind of like the and the ETLs as like a dongle, in the same way that if you get a laptop that is a USB-C, you still have an HDMI TV. You need to bridge between them, and you ain't going to throw that TV away if it's a good quality TV. So.
The next question is, won't this tax the production systems when analysis are performed?
So the production systems today are taxed with the need to do integration. So if you really think of the evolution over time, there's not as much data in the world as people think because it's duplicated so many times over. And that duplication requires computational resources. It requires data storage requirements. It has all these other considerations. So at real scale, you should expect dramatic reduction to data storage, dramatic reduction to computational workload requirements. And but that's more of an at-scale phenomenon. That's not an immediate and insta-fix. But the fabric itself, and this is how it's different than virtualization technology that provides a virtual view that does remote queries that do tax your production systems. It's caching the information. So new autonomous data is born on the fabric and the fabric alone. It's not ever copied, but your connected data is cached such that the queries and the analytics and the inquiries and the intelligence is powered by the fabric's infrastructure, and it's actually taking away the load requirements on the individual application. So you can actually suddenly run high performance queries and get thousands of transactions a second off of a legacy system that is on its last legs, and be able to do that without taxing it.
Great, thank you. Where's the best place to hire data architects who understand and can implement this vision? I think it'd be interesting, Sylvie, for you to give a perspective on this, since this all came to you as an opportunity to take those dolls and nest them and re-nest them.
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. Finding great talent is always a difficult thing. But I think part of it is being part of sessions like this, where you get to meet other people and people like-mind interests that are willing to try something new. I truly believe in the power of your network for this. And, looking at the people that have adopted like those new technologies in the past, they were like the initiators of transformation. But I think it's truly through your networks. And I think Cinchy knows a lot of great people, and they have internally folks that can help you on your journey as well and help teach the folks on your organizations to do this. So the platform is truly amazing and simplified.
Thanks. Dan, here's a question for you. How does this differ compared to the IBM Cloud Pak for data? I'd be interested in whatever collateral info you have as well. So if you could help differentiate.
Sure. So we probably won't have time to get into the detailed nuances of that, but happy to, if you want to reach out to us separately, we can have a deep dive into that and kind of decompose and break it down. But I think the way that I would just reframe what data centricity as the big shift is, and what a data fabric is technology that enables you to facilitate that, is the vision of a data fabric, at least from our perspective, is that it is your last silo. It is the source where data is originated in the future. So it's not a layer on top. It becomes your new platform for information, where the data itself becomes your application. So it's really the datafication and metadatafication of what used to exist as code and application logic. So this goes beyond simply moving it from on-prem to the cloud, and this is a complete reframe, a reimagining of technology where it's truly data at the center. So that's a very high-level answer. You probably have a lot of more detailed questions, but happy to go deeper into that separately.
Isn't data integration, oh, sorry, Sylvie, did you want to add to that?
Nope.
Okay, great. Isn't data integration to organize data in a more useful way? How can data centricity handle master data management?
Yeah. So another good question. So master data management is something that exists because data is fragmented, where you may have 3 different companies that eventually get merged into one, and they all have their own separate CRMs, and maybe they had some overlapping customers, and you got John Smith and Johnny Smith. It turns out it's the same person. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, and you want to basically have that intelligence so that you know that if they're the same person or different people. That's MDM, master data management. So that's very much going to be required for any organization that has any history, any scale, any existing systems. And the fabric itself may facilitate the mastering of that data, but you don't just install the software and suddenly it's all mastered. So that's a journey as well. The fabric can help to accelerate that. But the idea is that it's the beginning of the end. That's the general theme of this. So by moving to a fabric, it really solves that problem from ever having to happen again, where you have all these different representations of the same information that are stood up, where you then want to pull Humpty Dumpty back together again at the other end of that. So think of it as technology that can help you achieve the data mastering requirements, be it your core data sets like employee and customer, or your reference data sets that are defined outside of your company, but referenced by your company. But it is the beginning of the end of the need to ever do that again. So you can do it a last time. That's the way I would think about it.
This question sort of follows along that as well. How about data coupling and dependencies? The whole point of some systems is to sync other systems and or humans. Are you guys importing all the data in the network? Essentially, does all the company data need to reside in Cinchy?
So not overnight. Now, first of all, Cinchy and Cinchy is a data fabric. There are other data fabrics as well. So you should definitely look at the wider picture, and the theme of data centricity we're very committed to. And ultimately, if you buy into data centricity, you're going to be looking at technologies like this. And if you don't, then you want nothing to do with technologies like this. But the idea is that the fabric itself is under your control. So it is, think of it like a network. You can have a computer network, and I can have it in my home, and I can take 3 computers and link them together. But all of my digital knowledge that I interact with will be on my computer. But that doesn't mean that the computer is out of my control. If I'm using a cloud computer, a VM, then yeah, that information is stored remote. But you should definitely expect a fabric that doesn't take control over your data. Otherwise, it's not truly data centric. So the enablement of you to physically manage the information however you want, and also keep in mind that it is a network-based architecture. So it's not about the equivalent of a single computer. You can have multiple computers, meaning it's a distributed capability. It's a distributed system. So think of it as a network of networks. But the real question, I think, is that as you're starting to change how you deliver new technologies, where the fabric is your source of origination for new information, to avoid it from being managed within individual siloed apps, that will grow over time. So think of it as 2 years into your journey. If you added 2,000 new entities and 2,000 new attributes, that would exist in your fabric as autonomous data. And any data that was connected to the fabric would be existed in terms of a cached representation of that for that. So that will grow over time, but keep in mind that your aggregate data storage requirements will be dramatically lower as a result of that, because you're not copying data from system A to system B, and then again from system A to system C. It's your last copy for existing information, and new information, 0 copies.
Great, thank you. Another question, are you planning a SaaS model, or are you planning to continue with existing deployment architecture?
So we are planning a SaaS model for smaller organizations in the future. Like today, our focus is mid-sized organizations all the way up to large global enterprises. Like we have some of the biggest banks in the world. But the technology was really designed almost agnostic to individual sector requirements. And while it's suitable for highly regulated, it could be used for a startup of 2 people. And I can say that with confidence because we actually built our company off the platform, and we've scaled it to where we are today. And at the same time, I have experience in some of the biggest companies on the planet, and it's designed for that environment as well. So we think there's a huge opportunity for this to be available in a fully hosted model in the future for especially smaller organizations.
Great, thank you so much. I realize that is like 12:11, so I just wanted to say if there was anybody that wanted to ask a question direct, you can just quickly unmute your mic and you can ask either Dan or Sylvie a question. I want to give that opportunity, but we will wrap up in just a second. This whole session will be available on demand for you to also watch and share it with your community afterwards.